Hey everybody, this video is called Put into Action, and tonight we're going to continue our pass-through study here in the book of Leviticus. We're looking at the 24th chapter, where we're going to see the Mosaic Law put into action, as well as the pure oil and the holy bread in the tabernacle. And if you see a cat next to me, that's Nala right here. She likes to join in every once in a while until I preach Romans chapter 9 at her. But today we're in the book of Leviticus, so it's not going to bother her anyways. But let's look at verses 1 through 4, Leviticus 24. It says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel that they bring to you pure oil of pressed olives for the light, to make the lamps burn continually. Outside the veil of the testimony in the tabernacle of meeting, Aaron shall be in charge of it from evening until morning before the Lord continually. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. He shall be in charge of the lamps on the pure gold lampstand before the Lord continually." So these are additional instructions for the tabernacle in relation to the lamps. And the lamps in the tabernacle, they stood on solid gold lampstands that were the only source of light for the tabernacle. And they had to be treated to continually, and they had to be supplied continually with olive oil and trimmed wicks so that they could continually give their light. And I think it's cool that we're in this part of Leviticus right now, because for the Jewish community and others, some people practice Hanukkah, the festival of lights. And this is kind of what it reminds me of when I read about the gold stand with the lights lighting it up. But as a Christian, I believe that it gives us a bigger picture of light, and I'll go over that in the wrap up here. But verses 5 through 9, it says, "And you shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each cake. You shall set them in 2 rows, 6 in a row, on the pure gold table before the Lord. And you shall put pure frankincense on each row, that it may be on the bread for a memorial, an offering made by fire to the Lord. Every Sabbath he shall set it in order before the Lord continually, being taken from the children of Israel by an everlasting covenant. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, for it is most holy to him from the offerings of the Lord made by fire, by perpetual statute." So instructions for the bread for each loaf was made of 4 quarts of flour here. And the bread of the tabernacle, it speaks of fellowship and communion with God symbolically. And it's pointing to the breaking of bread with God and speaking of the continued fellowship that God had with his chosen people of Israel. And God wanted fellowship fresh, not stale communion with his people. God wanted a fresh relationship with them. In verse 10 through 12, "Now the son of an Israelite woman, whose father was an Egyptian, went out from among the children of Israel, and the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel fought each other in the camp. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name of the Lord and cursed. And so they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelomith, the daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. Then they put him in custody, that the mind of the Lord might be shown to them." So we see that the rest of chapter 24, it's going to focus on this man who gets in trouble with the sin of blasphemy. And this is one of many historical examples of blasphemy along the similar lines from looking back at Leviticus chapter 10 with Nadab and Abihu. And the blasphemer was one of many other people, and the people transferred the guilt of them all to him. And there weren't any jails back in Israel. There wasn't any incarcerations like the American jail system that we have today. So incarceration was not a penalty for committing a crime. It was not practiced. And so when you see that he was taken into custody, he was likely restrained in a pit of some sort. and he was likely restrained in the pit of some sort until they could establish what his punishment would be. And punishments, they were corporal in historic Israel, banishment and death in severe cases. And those who lived through the punishment, they would work to secure restitution for those that they had violated. And this man that committed blasphemy, he's a mixed man, so he's half Hebrew and half Egyptian. And he was part of the mixed multitude from Exodus 12, verse 38, that went with Israel out of Egypt. And verse 13 through 16 says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take outside the camp him who has cursed. Then let all who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him. Then you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, Whoever curses his God shall bear his sin, and whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him, the stranger as well as him who is born in the land. When he blasphemes the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death." So in accordance with the principle of Deuteronomy 17, verse 6 and 7, there had to be 2 to 3 witnesses that publicly laid hands on the accused as a sure testimony to their guilt. And so the accused would know his accuser. There wasn't no anonymous accusers. And God commanded execution by the stoning of stones. And there was plenty of stones in Israel that could be used for these types of executions. And when we see the death penalty carried out among Israel, it was a community involvement. It wasn't in a building with a couple of witnesses. It was a community involvement for both deterrent to deter others from wanting to commit the same acts, and as a means of proclaiming that the man had not only sinned against God, but that he sinned against the whole community as well. And that's what the judicial system is set up for. You know, somebody who commits a robbery might have a victim directly as a store owner, but overall, when they commit robbery, they're affecting that whole community. When somebody steals from Walmart or Target, that causes increase of prices. So overall, when people commit crimes, it has an effect on everybody. And blaspheming the name of the Lord was feared among Israel, that Jewish people would go extreme to avoid saying and writing the name of God, afraid that they would commit blasphemy. And they knew that they could not blaspheme God's name if they never said it and if they never wrote it. And that paper, that if it was destroyed, they thought that they could still be held liable for blasphemy. In verse 17 through 22, "Whoever kills any man shall surely be put to death. Whoever kills an animal shall make it good, animal for animal. If a man causes disfigurement of his neighbor as he has done, so shall it be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he has caused disfigurement of a man, so it shall be done to him. And whoever kills an animal shall restore it. But whoever kills a man shall be put to death. You shall have the same law for the stranger and the one from your own country, for I am the Lord your God." So in the context of giving penalty for the Egyptian blasphemer, God stated a fundamental principle of his justice system, that crimes must be punished, but in proportion to the appropriate of the crime. So the popular method here, an eye for an eye, many people have heard it. Jesus used it in the Sermon on the Mount, and a tooth for a tooth. The eye for the eye and tooth for a tooth, it is not a command from God, but it is given, God gives it with intent to limit what meets the punishment for a crime. It was to bring away from overkill and punishment. And as mankind, we always like retaliation out of our flesh. We like to see, when somebody wrongs us, we like to see them get hurt worse. And this also would set that judges would not be able to make up punishment as they thought was good. You know, it's in our nature to want to hurt others and hurt those who attack us, those who wronged us. We want them to get hurt worse. And the law is the law against retaliation. And in verse 23, wrapping up the chapter, it says, "Then Moses spoke to the children of Israel, and they took outside the camp him who had cursed and stoned him with stones. So the children of Israel did as the Lord had commanded." So this verse is important as it demonstrates that the law of God was not given to Israel just for an interesting facts or interesting guidelines, but that God expected obedience for this system to be carried out against wrongdoers, even if it would be difficult. So even in the act of blasphemy, it might be a difficult decision to bring, your best friend that you caught in the act with other witnesses, to bring them out in the community square to be stoned. So to wrap up here, we look at the law put into action with care to the tabernacle lamps. And Jesus in John 1:14 dwelt among us, being the light of the world, in John chapter 8, verse 12. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 14, it says, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden." So just as Jesus is the light of the world, and we are called to be the light of the world, being continually supplied with oil, who is the Holy Spirit, and have our wicks trimmed as we undergo trials for training. And we also look at care for the tabernacle bread in Leviticus, having fellowship and communion with God. And we looked at the case of the Egyptian blasphemer and the man's crime of blasphemy. And we looked at the penalty of death through stoning as the punishment. And we looked at provisions for law and order, and the law of retaliation prohibited expressed punishment. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 38 through 42, later on in the chapter 5, it says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you to not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away." So Jesus rightly condemned the taking of this command regarding law and order in the community, and he applied it to personal relationships and the Sermon on the Mount. And that's where love and forgiveness and going the extra mile and not seeking retribution is to be the rule. So we are to be loving and forgiving in personal matters. However, when it comes to situations that affect the community, like, you need the criminal justice system to be in place. In the chapter, it ends with the execution of the Egyptian blasphemer. And that's going to wrap up this video. And we'll see you next on Thursday, where we're going to look at the special Sabbaths and the year of Jubilee. So, and the rules of redemption in regards to poverty. So I hope you have a great rest of your night. We'll see you in a couple nights from now. God bless.